Charl, I want to talk to you about what some people are proposing for church security in the United States. And I would suppose this would be similar for a school, a place of business. Many times we'll see on the news where there's someone has committed a murder and they've barricaded themselves in a office building, let's say, and they tell everybody, go in your office, shut the door, lock the doors, and hide. And they have a lot of things they tell people to do. But there's a popular methodology that's going around right now. It's called ALICE training. All right, ALICE stands for alert, lock down, inform, counter, evacuate. All right, sounds reasonable. But here's what the ALICE training, and again, this is being told to people, this is the solution to a shooter coming into your church, your school, your place of business, in a nutshell. And I kind of think this is like Alice in Wonderland training myself, but it goes like this. Counter in a church setting sets everybody as the ones who are doing the countering to the attacker. They are supposed to start throwing hymnals, Bibles, purses, anything like it. Everybody is supposed to start throwing things at the attacker. And then once everyone has thrown things at the attacker, they're all supposed to get up and run and try to tackle the attacker. Now, first of all, what do you think of Alice? As we lay this up against your experience, do you think Alice training would work, let's say, in what happened at St. James Massacre?
Yeah, I think the Alice training is a very strange concept. The first time I heard about it, I thought it was a joke. But one has to think very practically about these things. And I think you're putting too many people in harm's way when you're trying to get the whole congregation involved in throwing Bibles, for instance, at the person. There are too many what-ifs. What if the person is on drugs that you're dealing with? A Bible coming at him is not going to make any difference whatsoever. What if there aren't any hymnals or Bibles around immediately to do this? What happens if you're the only person that's throwing the Bible? You're the one that's going to get shot.
It's hard to stay down on the ground out of harm's way and get up and throw a Bible.
Yes, and if somebody's in the middle of a bunch of benches, how are you going to get to him? Are you all going to jump up on benches and run over the top of them? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then back to the story where, the good guy with the gun is literally the only person that can stop a bad guy with a gun. Using pencils to fight a war with people who have guns, it's just not going to work.
Right. You actually had an acquaintance that you knew at the church, at St. James Church that night, who in frustration ran toward the attackers to try with his bare hands. Tell us about that.
What happened was one of the young men in the church had been trained as a paratrooper in our military. And so when the attack took place, what he did is he stood up and just ran straight for the attackers. He didn't have a firearm with him. He had nothing with him to do anything except his bare hands. And it was the screaming of his wife that stopped him in his tracks to come back and to protect her, rather. And, obviously within seconds they were running away because of the return fire. But that was his training and his thinking, which is very admirable. But at the end of the day, how are you going to take on, with your bare hands, 3 terrorists with automatic firearms, with weapons? And so there again, the Alice training might be fine if you've got one attacker. What happens if you've got 3 or 4 scattered around the congregation? What happens if they've got sentries standing outside for a second wave of an attack? It's really very badly thought out.
Well, it presumes the absence of a good guy with a gun. It presumes that nobody in the room should be having a firearm.
That's right.
And the answer, whether it's in school, business, church, is that you should have people with firearms and they should have a plan as to what to do and how to deal with it.
That's right. We've just had an attack in Kenya in Africa where we had a couple of terrorists come into a university and they managed to go through the whole university and shot dead something like 147 students. Now, you could throw as many books as you like. What is one book going to do against an AK-47? And so these people could walk around with impunity and just murder people as they wanted. what you needed there was just one student who had a firearm, who could have taken out one terrorist at least, and there would have been a big difference in the toll. Never mind the fact that the others might have been scared off too. We don't know. But if you had a couple of students with guns, it would have been a big difference. There wouldn't have been 147 corpses lying around.
There's just something wrong about expecting people to be put in a situation where they're defenseless, and that somehow, because of someone's ideology, that it's not allowed for a person to be able to defend themselves. Yes. And whether it's on a school campus or a church or anywhere, everybody should have the right, and we have the inalienable right given to us by our Creator, according to our founders in our founding documents, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes, Bruce, it also, we can look back at examples of where people have defended themselves with guns. And so we're not talking theory. Right. We can look back at the St. James Massacre and say one gun stopped 3 terrorists with assault rifles, with automatic rifles. We can look at some of the attacks here in churches in America. The focus on the family attack. Places where there was people with guns and they could stop the attack from taking place. Where are multiple shootings taking place, multiple attacks? In gun-free zones. Again, when it comes to schools, where are children being attacked in schools? In America, in gun-free zones. There hasn't been a single attack in Israel since the 1960s, since parents and teachers have been carrying semi-autos inside the college campus, inside the schools. And that tells you something. We're talking about practical, working out experience. You can look at it, you can see what the results have been, whereas the Alice is very much just theory. It's playing around with ideas, but we need to look at solid examples and use those as our criteria.
Well, if you do not have a firearm of any kind, then I can understand doing everything you can, not to just lay down and take a bullet in the back of the head or so forth, but to do everything you could. But the simple answer to that, we don't need Alice training. What we need is firearms training. Yes. And we need the freedom and liberty in the United States of America to protect ourselves wherever we go. Now, many of us can choose when we walk up to the door of a mall and it has a gun with a circle around and a slash through it, we can choose not to shop there. We can just go back to our car and go somewhere else, or a restaurant or whatever it may be. But there are some places, a place of business, a school, so forth, our church, where many of us believe we should not be limited in where we can protect ourselves. Because honestly, evil does exist, and evil chooses the most soft target possible, and it chooses the gun-free zone and where there is no potential for someone shooting back.
Yes. If you look at areas like shooting ranges, police stations, gun shops, how many multiple people shootings take place in those areas where there are guns everywhere? They don't take place there. They take place in gun-free zones where people cannot protect themselves. And going back to the church massacre, I was once, we were doing a TV shoot, a TV show at Parliament, and Letlapa Bechlele, the commander of the troops that shot up our church, introduced me to somebody, and this was his comment. He said, there we thought the church was a gun-free zone, but boy did Charl have a surprise for us. And so that was part of the reason they chose the soft target. Terrorists don't go choosing targets in police stations and in gun shops and those sorts of places, shooting ranges where there are lots of guns around. They go for soft targets.
So straight from the terrorist's mouth, they picked St. James Church because they did not believe they would meet any resistance. And as he said, boy, did Charl have a surprise for us.
That's right. They didn't expect resistance, and that's why the church was chosen.
Now, that speaks for itself. That right there that's a T-shirt. That's a bumper sticker, I think, for the cause that you and I are discussing.